What's going on?
Hey, welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Glory. It's Nikki here.
And it's Sam.
And we are on episode 18.
Yes, number 18. That means we're like adults now.
We're official.
We're like podcasting adults.
We're like, this is not drinking age. Is it smoking age?
Smoking.
Nah, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Sorry. That's okay. You might be hearing a third voice here on the show today because this is a really special episode.
Yes, it is.
Because this is our first episode having a guest on the show. Can I stop it up?
Yeah, woo!
So we want to introduce you to our friend, a friend of the good, the bad, and the glory, Veralyn. Say your last name?
I don't mind.
Veralyn.
No felonies.
Veralyn Williams.
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited to be here and to be the first guest. I'm like going to go down in history.
Yes, absolutely.
This is really big. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Absolutely. We're doing grown podcast things out here.
Yes.
So we're going to jump right into our hot topics, and then we're going to talk more with Veralyn a little bit later in the show.
Can I jump into the hot topic?
Of course.
Okay.
We would be so happy. First, before we jump into hot topics, how was your weekend, Sam?
Let's see. My weekend was
I just want to say this is my favorite part of the show.
Oh, really? Let's talk about our weekend?
I was like, what were you doing? And one time I saw you in the weekend. And I was like, is she gonna mention? And then you shot me outside.
That's so funny.
I actually come prepared with what I did this weekend.
Weekends are a blur.
Yeah. So I think Saturday was one of the first few days that I did not have anything to do. So I did a lot of cleaning around the house. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a surprisingly low-key weekend for me. I pretty much, my wife and I, we visited my parents, spent some time with them. It was my grandmother's birthday this past week. She turned 82.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it was really low-key and chill. What about you, Nicole?
Surprise! I don't know. I guess it was a low-key weekend for everybody.
Yeah.
I literally did nothing all weekend, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was the perfect thing. Friday, I did nothing. Saturday, I did nothing. And then I had a meeting on Saturday night, which was cool because I did nothing all day. And then Sunday, I went to church. Oh, I did something really cool on Sunday night.
Okay.
And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. But the Bridge Church NYC has had a showcase. They're doing a God of Freedom series on American slavery and God. And so they had an event on Sunday night called God of Freedom. It was it was a cafe, they called it. And they had someone who was incarcerated for 7 years who came out and is now a professor at Columbia on the criminal justice system. So he came and talked, and then they had an art gallery. It was really, really cool.
Oh, that sounds
So
dope.
I went to church and I did that on Sunday night. So that was pretty much my weekend. I'm coming down with a little scratchy throat thing. I'm not with it because this weather's bipolar, but
yeah,
I'm all good though. My weekend was pretty chill. Veralyn.
Oh, I get to say what I did.
How was your weekend?
Absolutely.
Oh, cool.
The people want to know.
Oh, what did I do this weekend? Nothing on Friday. I took. I've been working really long days, so I took Friday off.
Nice.
And I went and got a massage.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, in Brooklyn. That was my thing. I wanted to find something local.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually pretty good. It wasn't a hole in the wall, but they gave a really good massage, which is what's important. And then Saturday I went. I had my book club met.
Oh, you have a book club.
I have a book club. Yeah.
Can I ask what you guys are reading?
Well, we usually read a memoir or a fiction book. Always women authors or writers.
Love it.
This is my first time not reading the book because it was it was a meditation book, and I just like I said, I've been working a lot, so I haven't been in the mindset. And then also sometimes I feel those meditation books, a lot of the teachings, I'm a Christian, and so a lot of the things I would be well, that's kind of what Jesus says in this
Gotcha.
It feels sometimes I don't know. I don't want to get into the whole
Yeah.
But I didn't read the book, but we had a good time. Just hanging out with my friends. And then Sunday, a mentor of mine is leaving New York, so we went to her goodbye party.
Cool.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, so
Sounds fun. I love weekends.
Yeah. And I went to church.
Yeah.
Y'all always say I went to church, and I'm always just yeah. If I didn't go, I'll be I didn't go to church. But I did go to church this Sunday.
Nice. So, do you go to a church in particular? Or
I go to actually the church that Nicole grew up in.
I did, yeah.
It's so interesting because
really?
Nicole's sister was my roommate, my first roommate when I came to Brooklyn.
Yep.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I came to Brooklyn. It's mad far from where I grew up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to be commuting to my church that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So I just started going to church with Nicole's sister, Nadine.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know how you feel like you go, okay, that's where I'm just going to go now.
Yeah.
But then I'll find a home church.
Right,
and then it just became my home church.
Wow.
Faith Life Ministries, Eastern, should I just give the address? Eastern Park.
Sure, go for it.
You know, if you want to come, come every Sunday.
Awesome.
It's so interesting because, and I guess we'll get into this, but like for a very long time, I get uncomfortable with like, I feel like no one can bring someone to Jesus but Jesus. Like,
Absolutely.
like you can't call that onto someone's life.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a little like, I don't know, it's a feeling of like evangelism when you're telling someone like about God just like by telling them and going out of your way to tell them, as opposed to just like living your life and showing how you live your life and then have them ask you a question.
It'll come up.
It's
crazy.
So like even but I need to cut it out because sometimes like just now I'm like, oh, should I tell them where I go to church? That's we're talking about that.
Right.
So I feel like God's working on me as far as like those aspects.
Cool.
Gotcha.
Well, we're so happy to have you, and we're going to definitely talk some more about you, about who you are, and a little bit later in the show. But there's some things going on in the world today.
As always.
So I'll start it off, right? So for the past 3 weeks, we've been sort of unraveling this whole Harvey Weinstein drama.
Yeah, I hope this is the last week we have to talk
I really
about
hope
this,
so.
guys.
It's not.
It won't be.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But to me, this week is the most interesting because it came out this week or the past week that Lupita Nyong'o, the amazing actress, came out with a story of how Harvey Weinstein sort of assaulted her or approached her inappropriately.
Yeah.
Preyed on her.
Yeah, literally, while she was in school. This story was interesting to me. Well, first, let's talk about what actually happened. She was in school, I believe, at Yale, and he invited her over to his home and asked if he could give her a massage.
Yeah.
And this was as she was a college student. Long story short, she felt really uncomfortable and sort of flipped the script so that she would give him a massage because she felt more comfortable doing that as opposed to him. And she made her way out of the situation, thankfully. But she shared that was her experience. What was most interesting to me about this is that this is, out of all of the allegations that have come forth, this is the first time that Harvey Weinstein has said, actually, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
The first Black woman that came out and said, he came on to me, I've had this experience with him. He's like, nope. Everybody else, he's like, actually, I'm so sorry. I'm working on myself. But with this one, what are your thoughts on this?
Didn't he do something like he showed like, was it like a message or like or maybe a ticket or something, like, oh, she invited me to come to this show? Like,
He came back and said that, because in her statement, I believe in her piece where she talked about
she wrote an op-ed in the New York Times.
Exactly. In her op-ed, she talked about how she said that she would never sort of engage with him or work with him at any point. So in his rebuttal, he said, oh, she gave me a personal invitation to when she did Eclipsed on Broadway, her show.
That was her publilicist.
Exactly.
I'm sure.
Didn't nobody write you no publicist.
This wasn't personal.
Not at all.
She wasn't inviting you to a date night. What are your thoughts on this, on his rebuttal, on her coming forth and saying this? What's going on? What are you thinking?
Oh my goodness. Like, I feel like I can't stand this dude. Like, honestly, just thinking about like hearing all the women that he preyed upon and like how everybody's coming out. And it's like I said last week, like, it's just crazy how everybody, I'm not talking about the victims, I'm talking about like people who weren't necessarily involved with him. It was just this thing that everybody knew that impacted everybody. Yet it's like they were protecting him, or maybe in some kind of way thinking they were protecting themselves by keeping this secret like under wraps for so long. So it's just sick hearing these things. And then now for this to be the one that he comes out and tries to like defend himself against out of all the other ones, is just kind of like, wait a second, where were you, bro? I thought you were like in your corner, like just trying to shield yourself, trying to make yourself out to be like, oh, that's not, who I am anymore and stuff like that. It's just weird that he would seemingly single out Lupita, like,
and deny
I mean, it's
it.
not really weird when you think about the history. I mean, not to take it there, but just the history of this country is like they've been raping Black women forever. And so the idea that she would have the nerve to also voice what happened to her and think that she would be believed.
Right.
You know, it's like the audacity of her to even come out and say that, you know?
She doesn't deserve to have a voice in this conversation.
Pretty much.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
But if Lupita, if you're listening, I believe you.
Absolutely.
I believe you. I stand with you and I support you because this is crazy. This is nonsense. And I really pray that he sort of pays the consequences for his actions.
Yeah.
Because this is not something that just happened.
Yeah.
This is years and years, almost decades of his actions.
The same MO,
and
the same tricks, the same things he always does.
And he's been gaining success with this just happening, like this being under the rug, and it's not fair.
But one thing I've been thinking about is, why is this coming out now? Like, what is it actually? Like, I'm always just like, what is the actual cover up? Or what, you know what I mean? Like, why now, right? And then also just in the way that we're all kind of complicit in this being under wraps for so long, and even just the way that it's getting really deep. But even just the way that, you know, for instance, when I would like do man on the street interviews, I knew if I smiled at a guy a certain way, he was gonna stop for me and do the interview, right?
Yeah.
I think that like we're socialized to like this like unspoken contract that men have as far as like our sexuality, and like we use it. We want to dismantle this whole patriarchy, but then we'll also, in order to be successful as women, have to use it to our advantage.
It's like an exchange.
It's an exchange.
Yeah. And you kind of know that.
Yeah.
Right.
And as you're doing it, you know it. And I guess I'm just like working toward, like, what I do now, I try to do is like, when I feel myself doing it, being explicit about what's actually happening. And the men in my workplace will like laugh or whatever the case might be. Or if it's an interview, they'll laugh or whatever. Or they'll laugh it off. But it's a serious thing. Like, I catch myself in the moment.
I think what makes it even more complicated is layering on top of that being a Black woman. It's like, if you choose not to sort of leverage your opportunities with your womanhood, you are sort of deemed this angry person, or you're aggressive, or you're this, or you're that, or she's like kind of, I'm uncomfortable by this kind, you know? So you always have to soften the blow, and it makes it even harder to be when you're a Black woman. So
And I don't want to compare situations, you know, from anybody else who was harassed.
Don't compare. No.
Who was harassed by this man. But like, first of all, as this powerful man in Hollywood coming onto a woman, I'm sure she felt threatened already. Then as a Black woman trying to get into Hollywood, that's like another hurdle she had to go through. So many things are probably racing through her mind. Like,
he probably thought he never would see her again.
Exactly.
Right?
Like,
he probably even forgot that happened.
Yeah.
Because he's done it so much. So after his rebuttal, you know, Lupita's publicist said no further comment, because I'm sure I felt her on that. Like, I don't even want to get into it with you, that type of thing. So we're waiting to see what happens next. That's what's happening with that.
Yeah.
What else is happening in the world?
Well, here at The Good, the Bad, and the Glory, we want to give a very special birthday shout out. We record on Mondays, and today just happens to be the birthday of the executive producer of Grateful by DJ Khaled.
Yes.
Assad Khaled. It is his birthday. He had a birthday bash.
Huge.
I think that's the underrated way to speak of his birthday.
He
just turned 1 year old, and
he accomplished more than I have in my lifetime.
I think his probably was worth more than any party I ever had combined. All the parties in my lifetime combined.
No,
probably didn't equate.
Honestly though, I'm so inspired by DJ Khaled's love for his son.
Absolutely,
he's obsessed with that little boy, and it's like there's no, how could you ever be negative about that? Like, it's like this genuine, pure father-son love, and it almost feels like sometimes you can tell when something is just for social media or just for show.
Right.
Like, he really loves that little boy.
He does. Like, I follow his son on social media.
He has a page?
Yeah, his Assad has his own Instagram page. Okay? And then you'll see DJ Khaled in the comments like, "I love you so much" and stuff like that. It's just like,
I'm done.
Yo, you can't help but love it.
God.
Like, it's on another level.
And I think Diddy was one of the hosts at the
He was
party.
hosting, yeah. I
So,
think he
Do you
got
think he paid Diddy money to be there?
Probably not. I think they're friends.
Okay.
That's possible.
I mean, I don't know.
I think he would if he had to pay for Diddy.
He got the money. I mean, they're balling. So, I mean, either way, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Assad. Yes. Now, in other news, it has been reported that Justin Timberlake will be headlining the Super Bowl next year in 2018.
Wow. Okay, Justin, ain't no good gonna come to you.
Right.
You do right by Janet Jackson.
Listen, bring her out and do it all over again.
Now, I'm sure when we all hear the words Justin Timberlake and Super Bowl, I'm sure only one image can come to mind.
Absolutely.
And
are we boycotting the whole football thing?
So here's the thing.
I'm like, wait a minute. I won't be watching this.
Now, when I saw this, I was like, all right, Justin Timberlake. Now, Veralyn, you brought up.
And he be trying to be down with black people.
Exactly. Right. So exactly, you brought up.
All unfolded.
He needs to do right by Janet Jackson. You also brought up just now, he also trying to be down with the black people. It was also allegedly reported that his suit and tie buddy, Jay-Z, turned down the opportunity to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show because of what was going on with Colin Kaepernick and all the controversy that's surrounding the NFL right now. So it's just like, Justin, what do we make of this? Veralyn, what's your take on Justin Timberlake?
Justin, I remember, wasn't there like a award show and then he said something like offensive on, I forget the tweet that he tweeted.
Yeah,
and he was
too.
like, I was trying to basically, he was like, I was trying to be for y'all and you're taking it too soon. I can't, this is definitely not for verbatim.
Right. Was it after Jesse Williams speech?
That's right.
Yeah.
He had something to say about Jesse. Oh, he was trying to he said something along the lines like give him a voice, something that was like a little patronizing, and as Twitter does, they came for him.
Yeah,
and he was just like, go sit down or shut up. And like the whole thing about Jesse Williams' speech was like, let black people speak. I'm totally paraphrasing y'all. So go look this up. And so from that, I'm like, I kind of wrote Justin off first of all, from when he like threw Janet Jackson under the bus. And then after that, I was like, you know what? He's one of those people that think that he gets a pass, or that like I think he truly believes that like he's black.
Yep.
Like he truly, but like the way he operates and the way that he
hung out with Timberland too much.
I don't want to go into like but it is appropriate. I mean, like I think I think appropriation is when you do something, when you take on someone's culture and you don't give them credit.
Yep.
And I think that Justin does say like where his inspiration comes from, but I think that because he said it in the past, that he feels like he's embodied it, and so that he can talk crazy to people online. And this is just another example. Like there's all these people are protesting what's going on with Colin Kaepernick, what's going on with the NFL, the way that they are like pretty much not addressing his real reason for taking a knee, the fact that he is out of a job. Like there's just so many layers to that. And for you to just like discard that after Jay-Z decided not to take the gig, I mean,
right.
Again, no good is gonna come to you.
Yeah,
right.
Like similar to what you were saying, Veralyn, like for me, when it comes to like cultural appropriation, it's like, you can't be like so down to try to like take on the culture and profit off of it, but you're not down for the cause as well. Like when those same people, are going through, being persecuted, being, everything that's going on with police brutality and everything like that. I feel like I need to see Iggy Azalea out here in these streets, stuff like that. You profit so much off of like our music and stuff. It's just like, yo, like where you at now?
A great Amandla, she said that if only white people will care about black people as much as they care about black culture. And I think about that like at least once a day.
Wow.
If only.
If only.
Like it would be a dream if Justin Timberlake took a knee. Like, can you imagine? But I feel like that's the very reason why they hired him or they asked him, because he probably not going to. You know, it's probably he's probably a good person to smooth this all over. He's you know, he's white, but he's
Those
black enough.
People love him too. They love some Justin Timberlake.
But he's not gonna offend anybody.
Right.
So because they sure enough wasn't gonna bring Beyonce back. They weren't going to bring. I'm surprised they actually asked Jay-Z. Because I know he would have went for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
They tried it.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. I would like to see some. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just wanted to, because I was just thinking about what Nicole just said as far as like, is he going to take a knee? And the other night, Justin Sky, I think she did the national anthem at the opening game for the NBA. And she took a knee at the end of her, when she was singing the song.
Yes.
And like, when I was reading that and I was watching the videos, I like literally got emotional because I think that people think that taking a stand for what you believe in is easy. You know, like here she is, like, no shade, but I didn't know who she was before this moment. Oh, wow. I know she's popular, but I usually, you know, might take me a while to know who the person is. Yeah. So here she is having her moment, you know, the same moment that Whitney Houston has had, like all these probably people that she admires have had, and she has to make a decision, like, am I gonna take a stand? And she did. And like she probably is never gonna get invited back, you know, like it comes with a cost, you know. And so like all these people that, like you said, like if you love black people as much as you love black culture, you would also take a stance in moments and sacrifice something. It's not just about lip service. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Yep. Absolutely.
Agreed.
So we'll see what happens in February. I think it's in February, right? Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's usually around there.
Are y'all going to Super Bowl parties this year?
Oh, I always go to a Super Bowl party.
But are you going to go this year?
Dang, I didn't think about that. You know, I'll be honest. I
can have a Super Bowl-less Super Bowl party. Yes. All I need is wings. That's fine. I'm down for a party any day.
A cabinet party.
We can have a college cabinet.
I want to come.
Yes. We can wear the jerseys and all. Yes. That sounds good. So we'll see what February brings when it rolls around.
Absolutely.
So, you've been hearing this voice on the podcast, but right now we're going to get a little bit more into our guest today. So tell us, who is Veralyn?
Oh God. First of all, I just want to say this is like super weird to be on this side of the table, because usually I'm where you all are. Nice. Who am I? That's such an existential question.
I know.
Like what?
I know.
You know, around church folks, I guess I have to say I'm a child of God.
No, be who you are.
It's a Monday evening, Monday night.
No.
Who am I? I'm a storyteller. I'm a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a best friend. Yeah, that's who I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you do professionally.
So I produce podcasts for Slate.
Awesome.
It's so interesting because like I had a podcast back in the day, like years ago, because, you know, I came up in public radio. There are not a lot of people that look like me in public radio. It's definitely getting better nowadays. But at the time, it was like literally just Michelle Martin, who had a show called Tell Me More, which I listened to every single episode of that show when it was on.
Wow.
And News and Notes, which hosted by Farai Chideya, had just been canceled. Michelle Norris was doing, like, literally, I can tell you every black woman that was in the public radio NPR cipher. Wow. And I was feeling, and then there was Wendy Williams and Angie Martinez, and you know, those women on the FM side. But I've always wanted to do what we're doing now, which is more talking, having conversations, not just like, you know, doing the hot topics and like getting into what Diddy's doing or whatever the case might be. And so I started a podcast. So, but now podcasts are like
it's a thing.
It's actual thing.
Yeah.
And so I work for Slate, and I produce a show called Represent, which is a film and television podcast that addresses underrepresented voices. So underrepresented community. So I basically people that create or are in media that is not a straight white man. I can do it the other way, but I feel like it's better telling you what it's not.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier in the show that you're a Christian, and you talked a little bit about your work in podcasting and how you sort of the specific podcast that you work for right now works to sort of elevate the voices of the underrepresented. So how do you feel like your faith and your professional work sort of intertwine, or do they at all?
It's so interesting. I feel like I should start that by saying, so I've always been a person that believes in like what's my purpose, right? And so before I moved to Brooklyn, I was like freelancing, doing a whole bunch of things, and it was like 2013 with Trayvon Martin, you know, and the George Zimmerman verdict, and just feeling like I want to do something more than just report on things.
Yeah.
And so I started working for a community organizing group.
Yes.
And if you knew me during those times, you know, I was always trying to get you to come to a meeting. I was always trying to get you to tell me your story around police brutality or whatever the case might be. But then I was starting, so like when you're working on the local level, you feel like you're doing a lot because you're working in the community. But I was starting to feel like it was within a bubble, like just the people that already kind of like preaching to the choir. And I was feeling like, as far as like with my purpose, I mean, when I think about my relationship with God, I always think about my purpose. And so when I was feeling my purpose, I was like, well, what I really want to be doing is amplifying these voices outside of Central Brooklyn, outside of people that already believe in Black lives mattering.
Yep.
You know, and so I was like, okay, like how am I going to do this? And that's what kind of led me to Slate and what I'm doing now. And I've always felt like within the social justice organizing spaces, there is not a lot of people that are Christians. Like I definitely can count on my hand the amount of Christians that I encountered. And I'm the same way I'm talking to y'all now, like the same way, like Jesus just always comes up when it comes to my life, whether it's just talking about what I did over the weekend or I try to like engage different communities, and I think like there's always like comments around like homosexuality and acceptance and assumptions that people make about what the church is like. And so I've always kind of had to be like, well, I'm a Christian, you know. I've always had to be like the Christian representative, and just be like, well, I don't believe that and I'm a Christian,
right? That's a lot of pressure. Do you feel that way?
I never felt a lot of pressure because I also been lucky enough to have best friends that were Christians. And so I know that as far as just like me saying that I'm a Christian, I knew that I always joke like I'm not the super Christian. Like I feel like I have friends that are a lot further in their walk. And so I've always had the perspective of like, this is like a long journey. And so like, me saying that I'm a Christian and being able to like affirm that in the space doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I know that I'm not perfect. Right. All these different ways. And I know within my friend circle, like we're all at different places and we can all hold each other accountable on different levels. And so it's not pressure. And also because people honestly weren't trying to hear it. Like God wasn't trying to take them that day. People really just weren't trying to like, you know, you can say things and like people were just like, okay, Veralyn, like, or whatever the case might be. And also just like, it's interesting because like as far as the potential to see other person's point of view or to have compassion in a moment. Like other people, even though they, you know, they say like, oh, well, Christians are judgy, blah, blah, blah. But I always felt like, the person that had the most compassion in the room, you know? So I was also able to see that in the sense that like, I don't know. I mean, you may want to get with Jesus because like, you know, he would have been able to see where you're coming from at the same time. And like just the being able to see things from all sides. It's like a gift and a curse, right? Because sometimes you just want to be angry. Sometimes you just want to scream and just be like, why is this happening? This is so messed up. This is an injustice. But I think like realizing how you are forgiven and like the grace that God shows you, it allows you to show grace to other people. And it's like, at the same time, it's like I said, a gift and a curse, right? It's like the best thing is like being able to do that, but also like you're just like, all right, like Trump is president and people voted. You probably voted for him right now. Like, how do you like?
Sitting in a room at work with people who you probably
voted for this man.
That takes so much self-control and
just realizing that God is God.
Absolutely.
Yo, I was actually working at the time of the election, and I know I didn't walk back into work the same way again. Like just looking at people like, I know some of y'all all this time. Just
I took the next day off. I needed some time, but
I was in Cape Town. Living my
Wait, where?
Perfection.
Wait, you were where?
I was in South Africa.
Okay, gotcha.
I was like,
okay.
I timed out very well.
Yeah.
Like, wow. I was just like, because the time difference, I went to bed not knowing who was president. And I told my friends, WhatsApp me, call me. If Hillary wins. And when I woke up and I didn't see a missed call or anything from them, I just knew I had like a sinking feeling. Like, and then I got on the internet and I saw all that. And
oh my God.
But getting back to faith and work, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have like maybe a specific instance where maybe faith in the workplace kind of came into play? Maybe during a show, during a recording, or anything like that.
This is gonna sound so frivolous, but we had. I was doing this. So I'm the producer for Represent, but I also come on and co-host from here and there, and I did this like Bachelorette series on the first Black Bachelorette, and I did like a recap series.
Oh, nice.
And we had so one of the runner-ups, his name was Eric Bigger. He was the last Black man on the show to get kicked off. So he came really close. Like he was he was one of the final 3. And so he ended up coming on the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He was like our epilogue episode.
Wow.
Awesome.
So he came on. It was like right around the time where he could have been the next Bachelor. So he was doing like press and things like that. And he came on and he has this whole thing about like, it's miracle season. If you watch the show, like he has these like mantras, and he always came from a very inspiration-led point of view. And something about and he's had a tumultuous childhood and all this stuff, and I think like something that he said, and I was like, so where do you draw inspiration from? And he started saying like, basically he was trying to like from within himself or something like that, and he was like going on, and it wasn't the vibe that I was getting. Like based on what he was saying, I thought he was gonna say something like God or Jesus or something.
Yeah.
And so afterwards I said that to him. I was like, I thought you were gonna say Jesus, but okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And so like that moment, I know like he was kind of shocked, and my co-host so I did it with shout out to Robin. I did it. She wasn't in the room. She was calling in from Alabama. And she was like, oh, y'all have a church up in there? And I think like, people wrote in and they were like, oh, that was cool how like spiritual it got. And I think like that's just me. Like in my head, I was like, oh man, like, should I bring it up? Should I not bring it up? Should I make it obvious what I was thinking? Like, it's like, I always have the nuances of like how much of... Because when I talk about where my inspiration comes, you know what I mean? It's like
you're very clear.
Like I'm very clear, and
right.
but I never, I don't know, like maybe he is too, but he felt like because he's in the public, it's always that thing of like letting people feel comfortable because the same way we have shows about any other identity, Jewish identity, Muslim identity, like I feel like often like other identities are just other religions are just able to like profess what they believe very. Like go hard for it. And sometimes when, what's her name? Molly from Insecure.
Yes.
She was on the show. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And what I loved about what she said was just like, cause she's a virgin.
Yes.
And one of the questions Aisha Harris, the host of shout out to Aisha asked her was like, why did you feel the need to say that you were waiting? And she was just like, people overshare every day about all sorts of things.
Right.
Like the same way other people overshare about like, I just got it in last night.
Right.
Oh yeah.
She was like, why can't I? And I was just like, yes. And that's kind of how I feel all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whereas like I don't ever want to censor my natural impulse.
Yep.
Like I try to be authentic in that way. But even as I'm doing it, I'm thinking about it.
Yep.
So it's like literally I'm forcing myself to be authentic.
Yeah.
But it's really hard because unfortunately Christians have been the oppressors. Like we are the majority in this nation. Well. I don't know if we really are
quote
Christian.
unquote,
but we're the majority, and so at least as far as like what this nation was supposedly built on, and so when you're the majority, like the same way we tell white people to sit down, I often feel like I need to make sure that I'm checking myself, but I always feel that tension of like. checking myself, but also being my authentic self.
Absolutely. Not censoring your immediate response. That was so cool. I love that. We saw that you recently accepted the Edward R. Murrow Award for producing a Radio Rookies report on gentrification.
I have to, so interesting, because I'm also working, this guy is working on me on this way too. Like, I have to feel more comfortable with accepting praise.
Yeah,
or like,
absolutely.
but like literally you said that and my body was just like, here we go.
No, girl, receive this congratulations.
Right. Thank you.
Shout out to you on the work that you're doing. Can you tell us a quick overview of Radio Rookies?
Yeah, actually, that's how I even knew that there was something beyond Wendy Williams and Angie Martinez. It's a program out of WNYC radio that teaches young people how to tell their own radio stories. Nice. And when I was in high school, I actually was a radio rookie.
Wow.
And I produced my first story on my legal status. At the time, I didn't have a green card. I was applying for colleges, and I didn't have a social security number, and I didn't really even realize what that meant. You know what I mean? Like, being undocumented was, because when you were going to school with everyone else, you think, you know, you hear about the dreamers. Like, I literally was in that boat.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I guess the difference is that I did have a path to citizenship. Like, my parents had filed for me. It just takes a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't file for me until after 9/11 happened, because they saw that everything was changing, like the laws and everything. So that's when they filed for me. And so I did my story on that. And what that taught me was that experience of like Radio Rookies and doing that story was that like I am the owner of my own story. Mm-hmm. And like there were like all these stories coming out about immigration and like dreamers and stuff, but like no one else could have told that story the way that I told it. And I think like that was really inspiring to me, because it showed me that like the same way I have a story, everyone else has a story, and they have a story that they can tell uniquely well.
Wow.
And so throughout college, I kind of like interned throughout WNYC, and then when I graduated, I worked on the program as a producer.
Wow. And so that's a full circle moment, because now you're working with Radio Rookies and you've just won this award. So huge congratulations to you.
Yes.
That's awesome. And last question. What are your top 3 favorite songs or artists right now?
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I feel like I should
what
like
are you
open
listening
my, you know, I listen to a lot of Pandora, and so Pandora does the whole thing where
they do a little bit of everything.
But my number one this whole summer, I was blasting Cardi B.
Oh, of course.
But I know you feel a certain way about that, Sam.
Cardi B is a wonderful young woman. She's a great person.
We know also that we have differences. Yeah. You didn't even like listen to Solange at a point. I wasn't really sure what was happening.
You know what? We are yet praying for you,
yes,
Sam.
Yes.
I'm receiving the prayer.
Okay.
I gotta get around to it. I do.
I actually how I got into Cardi B was I was in New Orleans this summer, and I decided to go to a plantation, because I'd never been to a plantation. And I went to the Whitney plantation, and on my way up there, first of all, the driver was black. The driver that came and got me was black, and I felt a certain way about that. I'm like, this black man is driving me to the plantation. Like, I don't know what's happening. And so I literally blasted Cardi B in my head, because I just feel like I talk about someone that is like uninhibited, like just like, you know, as far as like her, like the way that she thinks about feminism and what it means to be a woman and what it means to like be in a male dominated field. Like, I definitely felt good to be listening to that on my way to a plantation. Wow. What else am I listening to? So I have a title, because it's Black-owned business.
You have title, nice.
Well, actually, I have.
Are you on the free?
I'm on the free
You cannot profess title until you're
right.
There ain't nothing wrong with that free subscription. Ain't nothing wrong.
So on the title, because like I said, I mostly listen to Pandora. That's where I listen to my Mary Pandora channel, like day and night. But on the title playlist, I have Unforgettable with French Montana.
Okay.
And then I'm Mad Ratchet. I have
Me too, girl.
Rake It Up.
Yes. Yes. Can I just say, that is my song. Okay? Let's just leave it at that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm actually not familiar with
Okay.
that.
All right, so
Rake
we
It
don't have
Up.
to put
Maybe I've heard.
Oh, wait, maybe we shouldn't.
Okay. They definitely said strip club.
You got 10 more seconds before we need that disclaimer.
We're going to put you on.
Oh, yeah. After the show.
So thank you for that, Veralyn. That was so cool.
Oh man, what's this? Oh, now I feel like I got to do a Christian song just because
to even it out.
Balance it out.
And just to throw in, the top gospel record that literally gives me inspiration almost every morning. Nicole just mentioned that I literally put in my Snapchat because every morning I listen to this song. It's KCJ, I'm Yours. Yeah. And she literally just says I'm yours. Like when you surrender yourself to God every day and just say God, I'm yours. Like literally, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about that song.
Wow. I absolutely love that song. KCJ is one of my faves. She's beautiful voice. So right now we're going to jump into our glorious thought for today.
Yes.
And I'm excited about this particular glorious thought. If my Google Doc can open up. I'm particularly excited about this glorious thought because I think it is it's an ideal representation of why this show exists. Right? It's the intersection of our faith and what we experience in the world every day.
Yeah.
And so our glorious thought today, we want to tackle Jesus and social justice, right? As believers, what does God say? How does God feel about social justice? And what is our stance? There's literally over the past year, 2 years, I feel like every week, every month, there's a huge thing that happens. And even if it's not a huge thing, maybe it's like something that a president or a politician says, or we experience this quite often. And we need to have more conversations about how we respond and what we should do. So where do we start on this conversation, right?
Well, why don't we, maybe we could define social justice real quick, just so everybody is on the same page. Yeah. So I don't know if any of you guys have a definition or what comes to mind when you think of social justice.
Well, good old Google says that social justice is justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunity, and privilege within a society. And I think that is a really nice way to say that everybody should be on the same level playing field. And that's not always the case, right?
So that's something that, like I said, I was in a social justice organization, community organization, and feeling like, the people around me didn't have the same faith that I did. And then I was going to church every Sunday,
right,
and not hearing my pastor talk about what's happening in the world. And the fact that you go on the subway and you see the police stopping young boys that, maybe they jumped the turnstile, but do you need 7 police officers to give them a ticket?
Right.
So and those kind of things, you gotta think about the trauma that our community is under, right?
Right.
I just felt like there were always so many opportunities to just bring it up or give people a word, how to even deal with this or how to respond. And I just wasn't feeling that. It's so interesting because I'm curious how you felt, Nikki, because like I said, that was a church you grew up in, right? And not to throw them under the bus, because it's an example of a lot of churches, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But I remember feeling particularly frustrated.
Yep. And the thing is, I don't even think it's an issue with one church in particular. I think the body as a whole, we talked about earlier, that we of this generation, or right now, we're in a culture of oversharing. We talk about everything. And specifically on the church, I feel like we're not loud enough on this thing, right? And so in that essence, I feel the same in that it feels like two very separate worlds.
Yeah.
I love God and I feel this way about God. And I know that God loves us all. And then there's this anger, this righteous anger that I feel when there's social injustice, right? And so I feel like over time, the worlds are sort of coming closer together and colliding and intersecting, but we have to have the conversation. And I know we've talked about this a few times, but the Bridge Church NYC is one church that I really admire because they go there. Yes. They go there all the time, and they're even doing a current series right now called God of Freedom, and talking about very specifically about American slavery and how God feels about slavery. And so Yes, I feel like that's the issue, right? That's the issue in that the two worlds are sort of separate.
Yeah.
In their sermon on, I guess because they put it out, I have listened to their podcast.
Yeah, me too.
Which is their sermon from the Sunday before. And actually on my way over here, I was listening to the one from this week. Mm-hmm. And Psalm 89 verse 14, it says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Love and faithfulness go before you. And what he was saying was, like to righteousness and justice are the same. So Jesus' holiness is the same as justice. So to know Jesus' holiness is to know justice. And I was just like when he said that, I was like, I thought about, because what my go-to had been the turning up the table one. I'm always just like, look at the table. Jesus threw up the table, right? And I feel like this is like another one. It's just like, to be fully holy, you have to be able to discern what is just. And the fact that is not even being spoken about in that plain language, like knowing let's talk about what's just, what does justice looks like, is like disappointing.
Yep.
Because then that leaves people like me who is like feeling this tension to seek that definition elsewhere. That's not the church.
Absolutely. And I think that, so many thoughts, right? So I've been reading a few articles on this, and I think it's been said that many pastors don't really take a stand on a specific side of a social justice issue because they're on a platform, they have followers, and they're most likely people who won't agree with them. Yeah. And they say, they run away from that conversation at the expense of losing people.
Right.
Losing people, maybe members who don't agree, maybe losing followers, or, that kind of thing. And so I think that has been an issue. Was it about 2 years ago? Was it last year? When I think it was Bill Johnson, who is the leader of Bethel Church, came out in support of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge thing because it was a lot for me. Yeah. Because number one, we're very quiet on social issues. And the minute that someone as big as Bill Johnson comes forward in support of someone who is blatantly has made he's not hiding the fact that he is a racist, that he's sexist, that he's, so many of these things. Yeah. And this is the first time, not the first time, but this is one of the most popular, speakers, and preachers, and this is what happens. Yeah. It was really hard for me.
Yeah, especially him being the pastor of like the world-renowned Bethel Church, Bethel Music. Mm-hmm. We sing their songs on a Sunday and stuff like that. So it was really disappointing for me when he came out about that. Of course, after a while, as Trump's presidency, started to unfold and we started to see what he was doing, he deleted that post.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, but for me, I was like, I need you to come out and say something.
Did Jesus tell you to support him? Where are you getting
that's the same thing with Mary. Bruh. Look,
Tina Campbell, disappointed. Yeah. I was so disappointed by her. So she said she voted for Trump because she felt like he was a Christian.
I guess he was had Christian values.
And let's just be real, what she's talking about is abortion. Yeah. Right. She feels like he would not support abortion
or gay marriage.
But is he also just not feeding people? Bro, what's happening?
You Tina has a black son. Your black son growing up in a Trump America. This is what you want to vote for because he's against abortion. It's just like that, and that's one thing that the pastor of the Bridge Church NYC talked about. Yeah. He talked about the fact that one of the issues with Jesus and social justice is that Christianity sometimes professes this individualistic approach to living life. God, you're going to be okay. You're going to prosper. God is going to prosper you. God is going to protect you, me and my family. I'm covered. But what about your brothers and sisters, right? What about your friends, your neighbors who are severely oppressed? You have money, you're okay. You're making a living for yourself. But what about the people who are actually dying? Yeah. If we think about Jesus and his work while he was here on earth, Jesus was for the marginalized. Yeah. Jesus was with the poorest of the poor.
And he wasn't about just going along with what's always happened. Like he went against the doctrines because he was just like, this doesn't, this like on a basic level, this is not what love looks like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think like that is often like mixed up. Like what is God, Jesus tell us about like loving people.
Right. And what I just thought about just now is when you see something like that, like Tina Campbell, like voting for Trump because of these reasons, to me, it shows like the church has kind of taught so much of like the law of God or these are the do's and don'ts of the church, but they don't teach much about the heart of God, which is why it seems like it's so hard to connect Jesus to social justice and that he would care about people who are marginalized, people who are oppressed and going through. They're so focused on Jesus about how he views people's spiritual lives more than just the physical state that they're in, when sometimes that was the first need Jesus met before he got to anything.
Immediately.
Like, hey, you're sick, let me heal you.
Right. You're hungry,
you know,
let me feed you.
Exactly. You know, so it just really shows that disconnect and why someone could think, oh, let me just check off abortion, you know, gay marriage. This is the candidate for me.
Right.
As opposed to like, yo, does this person exhibit or comes closest to exhibiting what God's heart should be for a people, for a nation.
Absolutely.
Something like that. It's crazy.
And I would encourage everyone to go listen to the series, the Bridge Church series. Another thing that they mentioned is this, like, because they were talking about like American slavery. And he said a few things. One, and this, I think it's like 3 episodes. So I listened to all of them back to back. So I'm not sure which episode is which. But when he was talking about Sojourner Truth, like he was telling the story about who Sojourner was. And I think she had a different name. Her slave name was different. And this how God told her, like God spoke to her and said that she needs to be free. Did you hear?
I didn't hear that one.
It was like I couldn't even sit here and like re-say that sermon. It was just so excellent, and it made me think about just like all of the like MLK, Harriet Tubman, like all the people that, you know, when you think about the way that the Bible was used to oppress people during American slavery days, you know, it's really like the role of white supremacy in that whole thing, right? And it wasn't like God was just, you know, God was still talking to us. And these were the people in which he was talking to, and their ability, the things that they were able to do, like only God could have done that. Right. And so to me, like it just further proves that like God wants the best. Like God is one speaking to us all times, right? Yeah. And that like false doctrine as far as like, you know, slaves be whatever the thing like slave owners use to like say that this is what the Bible wants. People, God was like, no, and he was speaking at that time. And like he made people like Sojourner Truth, like Harriet Tubman, like Frederick Douglass, like being able to like to survive the unimaginable and to come out on the other side and to profess their faith. And I think like we don't talk about things from that lens.
And that was another thing that I've gotten from this whole conversation, is that so many times because of some of the history of Christianity, or the gospel, I would say, in its roots in slavery, so many times our conversation around this is geared towards those who are oppressed. Right? Meaning like God is going to keep you, keep your faith. You know, God is going to cover you. God is going to protect you. Very rarely is our conversation around the oppressor, right? What are we going to, why are we, and this is something that Pastor Rich said, right? Why are we not having a conversation with the oppressor saying, no, this is wrong. Why aren't our efforts towards that, as opposed to us just saying, we're going to be okay. You know, that kind of thing. And I will speak for myself, and I'll say that, sometimes you feel very powerless. You feel very just like, this is so much bigger than me. This is not something that I can combat. And so I'm going to go into my cocoon with Jesus and, you know, pray that everything will be all right.
Right.
And that's just, especially with it happening over and over, you just get tired. You get tired. Sometimes you get numb, but that can't be the end.
Right.
It can't be the end.
Like to what you said, sometimes what we feel is the Christian response is to go in our corner and pray and like, oh, this is so overwhelming. God, you know what? You got this.
Right.
I thought of this story in the Bible when God had like a land for the people of Israel, and they sent scouts out, and they came back and they're like, yo, those people out there, they look crazy. We're grasshoppers in their sight and in our own sight. It's like, no, we should be using that faith to build ourselves up. Like, no, God, you've given me a voice. You've made me more than a conqueror.
Right.
I'm strong in you, Lord, and I'm able to speak out against the wrong that is going on, and not adopt this passive mentality, but adopt that mentality of Jesus in the temple with his whip in his hand saying, no, you're not going to come here in my Father's house and cheat these people. You're not going to do wrong by them. And we could stand up in that same way. I'm not saying go out and get any whips and start beating people, but
no tikis.
Yeah, no tiki turtles, nothing like that. But we can stand up, have a voice, speak out and say, no, this is wrong.
The reality is that today we are the voice of Jesus on earth. We are sort of the agents of change that Jesus is going to use to bring about any change on earth, right? We are his tools. We are his hands and his feet. And if we realize that, or the more we accept that, is the more empowered we are to sort of go forward and to continue to fight, and not just pray. Not saying that praying is not enough, but we're to pray and work. You know, God gives us wisdom. God connects us to resources. He puts us in certain conversations.
Absolutely.
He gives us access to certain, whoever the change makers in the world for a reason, so that we can insert his voice into the conversation. And so what do we do? What does that actually look like? Right. So we're talking about how we can bring about change, and what does that actually look like in the day to day?
Well, I think it's about knowing that you know it's not you alone, right? Like being in community, tapping into what's already existing, and then like handling the people that are around you. I feel like a lot of times we feel like, you know, we have to like change policies and we have to do these big things, but like, you know, have you like the same way, you know, the people in your office or your friends. Like I had a friend that wasn't sure who she was gonna vote for, and I was like every day I sent her articles. I mean, it wasn't because I feel like a lot of people of color, particularly Black people, had an issue with Hillary, right? And absolutely. So it wasn't an easy choice all around, right? But I feel like it's about like, first of all, like where do you get your discernment from, which is another thing, and it's something that like I'm not gonna front, like I struggle with all the time. Like I'm like, is this God? Do you want this or do I want this? Like sometimes you don't know, right? And so being in those moments, like even if it's just like, okay, God, like this is the thing, you know, what should I say? What should I do? Like just trying to make like prayer. Like I feel like for a long time I thought prayer was like in my room, like kneeling down, my hands clasped. And like what I've learned is that like prayer, like literally just saying it before you go into a meeting or before you know, I had anxiety around going into elevators with people around the election, because I was like, I don't want to have this conversation with you. I don't know where, you know. And so it's like literally just being able to like, first of all, and also like knowing what's around us so you can point people in the right direction. And so because I was always been tapped into like local things, I've always been like, okay, well, do you know the Brooklyn Movement Center? Do you know Black Women's Blueprint? Like, do you know Make the Road New York? All those organizations are right here in Central Brooklyn. Is this Central Brooklyn? Because this is kind of far out. But right here.
Southeastern.
Southern Brooklyn, no.
I'm sure there are things out here too, but like, you know, it's just like being able to like be tapped in, knowing that you're not alone, and meeting people in your, like I always say, like to deal with meet people where they are, and like talk to the people where you are. You know?
Yep.
Like social media is not always the place to do it either.
It's not. It's true. Not. I was actually at the event that I was at last night. Someone said that exact same thing. Sometimes we think about change as this big thing, like going to Albany and, you know, that kind of thing. But sometimes the hardest conversation to have is at the dinner table. When somebody says something that's actually really racist, and you calling them out, or not even calling them out, but just having that conversation and saying, you know, dismantling those things in your everyday. And I think we don't give enough credit to that.
Absolutely. Like you brought up work examples, you brought up home, even church. It could be hard to have that conversation, like talking to your pastor, like, hey, can we talk? Why don't we talk about this, you know, stuff? Of course, you come respectfully and everything, but you know, it's hard to have those conversations.
I would never forget, because I'm also like a little radical. Like I'm like radical when it comes to my feminist views, when it comes to, you know, a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget. The first lady of my church gathered all the women, the young women, and she was talking about pretty much like waiting, you know, but one of the comments she made around like your attire and how, you know, you're supposed to show up and like what you attract. And I was just like, but I'm like, at the same time you're telling us this, are you also telling the men in the church?
Hello?
Like,
we talked about that 2 episodes ago.
You know?
We just talked about that.
And I think it, like, for me in that moment, like everyone looked at me, because, you know, everyone knows me. Like, they know me.
Yeah.
And so everyone looked at me when she said that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, are you going to speak up or not? Right. You know? And I
call them out. Call them out.
It's really difficult. It's not. It's not even. Of course, you have to go with respect, and you know, like you have to like you just, you know, you say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I understand, because you also, it's about having compassion,
right,
and understanding like where she's coming from and the time she's coming from, and you know what her value system are based on. Like, I understand that, but we're living in 2017 in Brooklyn today,
right?
You know, where a young woman 2 years ago on the Parkway got killed because she told a man that she wasn't interested in talking to him. Like, she shot her. Yeah, you know. And so this is the times we're living in. So just telling someone what you're wearing, that's not going to save. That wasn't going to save her life. That's not going to save my life. It came down to it. So there needs to be a different dialogue that happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I know you mentioned a few resources. You've mentioned a few. Can you say that again, or tell us where can we get connected? Well,
the Brooklyn Movement Center, I would definitely say, like, is a starting point, because even if, let's say, you live a little far, it's based in Bed-Stuy, and their work is around Central Brooklyn, aka Black Brooklyn.
Yep.
And you know, they do work around police
community relations.
They do work around police accountability. Yep. So like, how do you, like, beyond like stop and frisk, or, you know, they have a bill called the Right to Know Act, which is all about like, when police officers stop you, they have to be able to tell you who they are and why they're stopping you, and they can't just stop you for random reason. It has to be like under the specific reasons why you know, the whole thing about suspicious reasonable suspicion, there are specific things that come under that, right? And so just like they advocate for those kind of things. They have an anti-street harassment working group, which is like trying to change the culture around street interactions, and not just thinking about sexualized harassment, but also gender harassment. So the way that trans women of color are stopped on the street all the time and like called out, and they're getting killed in numbers that we can't even begin to even, like, I think about the people that we don't even know. Right. That's something I think about all the time. They do work around food justice, so that we don't always have to go to Trader Joe's to get your food, which is what I do. You actually have healthy, affordable food in your neighborhood. I mean, it's like, and when I was working, like, I can tell you firsthand, because I used to work there, all those working groups came out of what the community said they wanted and needed. That's right. Great. And so it's not an organization parachuting in and saying, this is what I think you need.
This is what you need. Yep.
It's like, no, what do you need?
Absolutely.
You know?
I love that.
And so even if it's too far from you, it's also like, can connect you to organizations that maybe are a little bit closer if you don't live in Brooklyn, maybe specifically to New York City. So I would definitely, I still give them money. I don't even work there no more.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We will definitely get connected. It sounds like they are doing some really impactful work in Brooklyn. All right, so we want to take this time again to thank you, Veralyn, so much for joining us today. Tell us where they can find you on social media.
On Twitter, you can find me at Veralyn Media, V as in Victor, ERALYN as in Nancy, Media. Instagram, at Miss Veralyn. I think that's about it. Oh, definitely go ahead and listen to Represent. You can subscribe. Just look at Slate Represent to find that podcast. And yeah, I'll be on the internet.
Our first guest.
Yay!
Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I'm so proud of you all. Like, I remember when Nicole first, I don't know if you I got an email about it. And I was just so excited because I think like these kind of conversation based in faith, this doesn't exist. So I'm very happy this exists. Thank you all for doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
We're so happy to have you.
One other thing before you go, are there any like other projects you're working on coming out soon, or anything that people should be looking out for?
I'm always working. Oh, well, this is I'm always working. Follow me on Twitter. You'll find out about another project I'm working on called Family Ghosts, which is what I was coming from before I came here, and I had a low energy because it's definitely draining sometimes because people's deepest, darkest secrets.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So we'll definitely be following you and keeping up with that new project. As always, if you want to continue this conversation, go ahead and shoot us an email. If you have any thoughts on what we talked about today, we can follow up with you. Shoot us an email at goodbadglory@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at goodbadglory. We have a Facebook page as well. And it's the good, the bad, and the glory. So Sam, where can they find you?
You guys can find me at Oh My Lord. That's OHMILORD. That's on Instagram and Twitter. You can also find me on Snapchat, Proverbs Boy, PROVERBSBOY. Follow me. I love to make new friends. You can also log on to www.goodbadglory.com.
I keep forgetting about that.
Oh, yeah. It's all good. And you could check out all of our podcast episodes, see everywhere else we're located on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, check out the episode where Sam said he didn't listen to Solange's album. And the world
was
like
confused. 3 of those episodes. I'm getting on and pray for me.
Oh Lord. Okay, and you can find me You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at NICKITY_. Again, that's NICKITY_ because I'll be posting stuff.
Absolutely. And that wraps up this week's episode. Don't forget to leave a review and rate us. And always remember, no matter what we talk about or who we have on, whether it's good or bad, it's all for the glory.
Yay!
See you guys next week.